lot of things in life cannot or will not be compromised, the most familiar case being the perennial conflict between workers and employers. In the mid-1930s, when American labor was asserting its right to organize, there were literal battles in which over 20 people were killed and 600 wounded. In one crucial strike, 25,000 steelworkers quit because the company ignored a new law that allowed them to join the union of their choice. Who in such an issue is to have the final say? Well, it was settled in the end not by the company or the union or the president or the Congress, but by a body of men created in 1787 in Philadelphia, the one absolutely new thing in government invented by the founding fathers. You see, the Constitution set up the president to keep an eye on the Congress, and the Congress to keep an eye on the president, and to keep an eye on both of them was something else. A Supreme Court of judges appointed for life above the political battle. And yet, and this is vital, they are able to decide the outcome of all the battles, political and social, of American life that engage the best and the worst passions of the people. And this is the place where, over the longest stretch of time, the United States Supreme Court has sat. It is the watchdog of the ordinary American citizen, and there's nothing like it. Now, you'll suspect, rightly, that the court is a hobby horse of mine. Let me tell you why. I've been a working correspondent in this country for over 35 years, and I only now realize how often I've looked down the years at some really dangerous crisis that was happening and said, thank God for the Supreme Court, for these 9 men who guard the rights of the ordinary citizen. And the ordinary citizen can be the president or a pimp, a banker or a bum. And the judge's brief and their Bible is the Constitution of the United States. They, not precedents, the Constitution, they sit most days of the year and they look into the Constitution and they decide if something that somebody had done, anybody, is legal. Whether you can, for instance, run an undertaker's and also own stock in an insurance company. You cannot. Or whether a stage play of naked men and women running around shouting 4-letter words is constitutional. Well, I'm not sure, but at the moment, I think it is. The 9 judges are never bound by precedents, not even their own. They have defended the right, some right, of children to work in factories throughout the night, and then absolutely forbidden them to do just that. They have proclaimed the right to keep blacks and whites apart on trains, and then 60, 70 years later, proclaimed the right to put whites and blacks together on trains, in schoolrooms, theaters, everywhere. So you see, the Constitution, like the Old Testament, can be cited to forgive one's enemies or gouge an eye for an eye. But make no mistake, this chamber is haunted by memorable faces and single sentences that have transformed the life of the American people. Chief Justice Marshall, it is emphatically the province and duty of the Judicial Department and nobody else to say what the law is. Mr. Justice Sutherland, the liberty of the individual to do as he pleases, even in innocent matters, is not absolute. Mr. Justice Harlan said 80 years ago against all 8 of his colleagues, the Constitution is colorblind. Mr. Justice Holmes, a Constitution is made for people of fundamentally differing views. Chief Justice Hughes, the Constitution is what the judges say it is. So it is. And since a majority of the 9 decides everything, the Constitution is what 5 judges say it is. Now, this sounds very alarming, but these 9 men are human and of various character, and there's nothing rigid about the authority of the Constitution. It bends to the moral winds of the time. But if the judges are behind the times, and if ever their integrity as honorable men is seriously questioned, then the court and the country are in trouble. But I've noticed that an odd and impressive thing can happen, when a man is appointed to the court. The president may think he's installed a ventriloquist's doll, but suddenly the man is paid for life and can become himself, a quite different character from the one the president ordered up. And so remarkably often the court has kept the country on an even keel in the stormiest times. Believe me, it will be a bad day for Americans if ever the mass of them come to lose faith in this court as their fair and final protector. There might have been no all-powerful court and no workable constitution if the founding fathers had not listened to an American who was not present in Philadelphia. He is the missing giant of the convention, Thomas Jefferson. He was in Paris as minister to France, and he heard with alarm that George Mason had failed to impress on the convention the vital need for a written Bill of Rights. In France, Jefferson looked around him and he saw most of the old indignities the Constitution had failed to prohibit. And he wrote continuously back to Philadelphia, "You must specify your liberties and put them down on paper." Within 4 years, 10 amendments came into force as the Bill of Rights. One, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. 2, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. 3, no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner. 4, the right of the people to be secure against unreasonable search and seizures shall not be violated. 5, no person shall be tried twice for the same crime, nor compelled to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. 8, excessive bail shall not be required, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted, and so on, through 10 amendments. All were adopted within 4 years as the original Bill of Rights. Since then, there have been some 15 others, all incorporated in the body of the Constitution and serving as the only brief and Bible of the Supreme Court. As Hamilton had guaranteed the central structure of the United States, and Madison the large powers of the individual states, so it was Jefferson who thought most steadily of the chief beneficiary of these labors, the people. You might think of such a man who disliked cities, idolized farmers, as a simple rural crank. He was not. He was a very remarkable American 18th century type. Upper class, classless, inventive, ingenious, scholarly, eccentric country squire. This is his house, and he was the architect of it. He got up always with the sun, but like a lot of us who travel between hotels, he didn't like to look at his bed all day. So he devised a series of pulleys and an enclosure in the ceiling into which he could pull the bed soon after he got up. This way he created a walk-through that connected that sitting room with this study. This house is full of novelties of his invention, which today we take for granted. A revolving chair in which he could follow the light as he read. Find his own spectacles and medicine chest, and a four-sided lectern which allowed a chamber music quartet to play from the same stand. He was an enthusiastic amateur musician. In fact, he was an amateur everything, an amateur of astronomy, of interior decoration. He designed the curtains all here, of architecture, of gardening. He learned Pippin. The Albemarle Pippin, by the way, if anybody cares, was Queen Victoria's favorite apple. He was a lifelong note-taker. He wrote reams of notes about everything, the Greek and Roman authors, the contemporary French philosophers, geology, Hebrew manuscripts. Here are his notes on his native state of Virginia. Here he compiled a list of all the trees, plants, and flowers in the state of Virginia, and an account with all their locations of all the known Indian tribes of North America. He also had a theory of currency, which he carried against the bankers. He carried it with the Congress and anticipated the British government by nearly 200 years in pointing out the laboriousness of pounds, shillings, and pence. He wrote simply, "The ordinary man has to divide by 12 and carry, and then divide by 20 and carry, whereas in a decimal system, everything is divided by 10 to the great ease of the community." I must say that if there's one notebook I'd give a great deal for, it's the one he carried around Europe. He padded around Paris, jotting down all the detestable a republic would not have. No public statues, a prejudice which the American people have successfully overcome. Titles of nobility, a very great vanity, he wrote, which tends to prolong the artificial aristocracy of birth and wealth as against the natural aristocracy of talent and virtue. He went to London and visited the courts, and he made a note: "No wigs on judges. We must not have men sitting in judgment who look like mice peeping out of oakum." You know, there's something almost comical about Jefferson's earnestness and maybe a little prim, but to me something very pure and innocent too. He believed that nothing but good could come from the total open public discussion of every issue. And when he heard that the Constitutional Convention had adopted its rule of secrecy, he said, "This is an abominable precedent," because he really did believe, and he said it over and over again, in the essential goodness and wisdom of the common people. Alexander Hamilton would have groaned to hear him. A few days before Hamilton died, he wrote, "Every day proves to me more and more that this American world is not for me." Well, so far as Jefferson could see, it was for him. Maybe Hamilton could see a little farther into the future than Jefferson, who foresaw a continuing utopia of chivalrous and learned rulers walking hand in hand with good, honest farmers in, a favorite phrase, perfect harmony. I don't know. But he used to retreat here as often as he possibly could, even when he was president. He called Washington that Indian swamp in the wilderness. And when you think of him sitting here amid his dreams and his books and his gadgets, it's no wonder that cities and slums and frontier violence never crossed his mind. But over the mountains in the interior, there was another people, And if it was the ideas of such as Jefferson that invented the new nation, it was the rude men of what Americans call the back country who changed and secured it. This was the country of Daniel Boone, an undefeatable wagoner, blacksmith, hunter, explorer, surveyor, who tried time and again to beat a trail into a new colony. Before he made it, he was wounded, he had a brother killed, a son killed, he himself was nearly drowned, he was drenched by blizzards and beaten by Indians, and he saw families massacred. At the end, he was swindled out of the tracts of land that he'd cleared and laid title to. But the brutal experience of this hero did not deter over 100,000 people pouring into the new territories of Kentucky and Tennessee within 15 years. And within 30 years, the population of the United States doubled, and the overflow, both of young Americans and European arrivals, went inland through the mountains into the valleys of the Mississippi and the Ohio.
Rise you up, my dearest dear, and present to me your hand, and we'll all run away to some far and distant land, where the ladies knit and sew, and the gents they plow and hoe, and we'll ramble in the canebrake and shoot the buffalo. Come, all ye fine young women who have got a mind to go. You can make us clothing, you can knit and you can sew. We'll build you fine log cabins by the blessed Ohio. Through the wild woods we'll wander and we'll chase the buffalo.
They were unlettered, mostly hunters, trappers, pinching farmers, living a tough, classless life, making with their own hands all the necessities of life. Like the Puritans 180 years before, their single obsession was survival. And to survive, they had to bargain with or slaughter the Indians, whose lands they'd encroached on, and then they had to tame the landscape.
The first white man in Cumberland Gap was Dr. Walker, an English chap. Cumberland Gap, Cumberland Gap, way down yonder in Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap with its cliffs and rocks, home of the panther, the bear and fox. Cumberland Gap, Cumberland Gap, way down yonder in Cumberland Gap. Me and my wife and my wife's pap made our way through Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap, Cumberland Gap, way down yonder in Cumberland Gap.
We are here in a high mountain valley in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. The first white man to make a clearing and settle here was a man named John Oliver, and in 1818 he built this cabin. It's only 400 miles as the crow flies from here to the Atlantic Ocean. But in those days, the crow had it much easier. Remember that I said at the Philadelphia Convention, nobody made a favorable mention of the word democracy. Well, these backcountry people, they would mention it, because they were the people we can now see who initiated a very familiar conflict in American life between the metropolitan man and the outlander, between the Midwest farmer and Wall Street, between upstate and downstate. And this conflict still dictates the balance of power and prejudice in the state legislatures. Now, the people who came through here and literally had to shovel and fight their way through the mountains, they were the first Anglo-Saxons who had, as we say, gone west. And pretty soon they would be heard from. And when they were, a new stage direction would be required for the next act of the American drama. It would say, loud noises heard off stage. Enter Demos. Democracy would plant a ruder strain in the character of the Americans and their government. For the people who lived here had few links, if any, with the writers of the Constitution. They would transform the Republic beyond the imagining of the learned and graceful men of the 18th century.
Drop back and swing it.
A longing in the heart of a pure maiden's breast that dwells in the heart you are breaking as you take the long trail to the west. Come and sit by my side if you love me. Do not hasten to bid me adieu, but remember the bright Mohawk Valley and the girl that has loved you so true.